Hey everyone, this is Nick Robertus teaching you financial modeling. Today we're going to be talking about forecasting complex time series. This is part of our lecture segment on free cash flow estimation and forecasting. So we already covered how to forecast more simple time series, which is represented by basically it being flat or just trending up or trending down in a pretty clear, simple way. Um, but often it's the case that you have a more complex pattern going on in your financial statements. So this kind of pattern is what I'm talking about, where you see just repeating patterns over and over in the data. We can see that there's also a trend going on here, but there's this repeating pattern which makes this a complex time series, and a simple trend or growth kind of model is not going to be able to represent these repeating spikes in the data. This is Walmart's quarterly sales that I've pulled here in order to show this plot. And basically, what's going on is that there's seasonality here in the data. Um, Walmart is going to sell more around Christmas time, the holidays. And so we see those spikes happening year over year, every year. So if you want to forecast the quarterly sales, you have to be able to account for that. Some quarters are going to be better than others year over year. So we can kind of break down this plot into two separate plots, one looking at the trend component and one looking at the seasonality component to better understand what's going on here. As we had already seen, it is trending upwards over time, and so we see that trend effect going on here. And then this is representing throughout the year where are the spikes. So we see this spike in the December timeframe, and we also see that sales tend to be low after that initial time frame going into March. So here, a certain time series model was used that does allow to decompose these two different parts. Um, and it's useful to do this kind of separation because then you can really understand the seasonality component in more detail, which gives you an insight into what's going on in the business. So you've got a complex time series. You've looked at the historical plot and you say, well, this isn't just simply going up or exponential or flat. There is some kind of repeating pattern that I need to be able to predict. So what do I do? So in general, it is a little more complicated or substantially more complicated than the simple forecasts. Still, the overall process is the same. You fit the model on the historical data, and then you use that fitted model to predict the future. But picking the model to use for your complex time series can be a complicated and involved process. So I've given a resource here that you can read more about that if you're interested. But there is a simple approach that we can do specifically for the case of this seasonality issue. If you're just trying to capture seasonality in your forecasts, then there's a fairly simple model we can use for that, and we'll look at that explicitly. And so when dealing with quarterly data, we call that the quarterly seasonal trend model. But that may not ultimately produce the best fitting forecast. There may be other features of the data that you need to predict than just the seasonality. And it's definitely outside of the scope of the course to discuss all the different models that you could possibly use for all the different use cases. But what I can recommend that you can do instead, in the meantime, until you want to go and learn all of that, is there are software solutions which can help you pick the appropriate model. So Profit is one such software package which does this. It's created by Facebook. They use it for their in-house forecasting of usage metrics and things like that. And we can just use that in order to predict our complex time series without having a deep understanding of all the details of how you should go about selecting these more complex models. And as we'll see in a future video here soon, into the fin statement package, which I've created, I've also built in an integration with Profit, so you can automatically use Profit through fin statement. So let's just go through the quarterly seasonal trend model. That's going to be the one complex model that we're going to look at actually estimating. And we're just going to say for everything else, we can just use Profit in order to automatically fit the model for us. So the quarterly seasonal trend model, it looks a little bit like the trend model. Well, it is the trend model, but then plus these additional components. And these additional components are including dummy variables, and one dummy variable for each quarter. And so by that approach, then you're going to have a different coefficient fit for each quarter, so that it's able to adjust and say some quarters should be higher than others. So these dummy variables are just going to represent that it is this quarter or it's not this quarter. So if your sales or whatever observation is for first quarter, then this variable is going to be 1 and all the others are going to be 0. Whereas if it's second quarter, then this one's going to be 1, the others are 0, and so on. These dummy variables are just 1 or 0, 1 to represent true, 0 to represent false. And it's going to be true or 1 whenever this particular observation, this time period, is within that quarter of the year. So to fit this, basically we have to create these dummy variables, and then we just throw them in there in the trend regression model, and that will fit this quarterly seasonal trend model. As far as predicting it, so you're just going to fit it like the trend model. So this constant plus the beta times the time period. But you're also going to add on the dummy corresponding to the appropriate quarter. So if the next period that you're forecasting is first quarter, then you're going to add the coefficient on the first quarter dummy. If it's the second quarter, then the second quarter coefficient, third quarter, third coefficient, and so on. And you're only adding one of them because, again, these are dummy variables. Only one of them is going to be taking a value of 1 at a given time, and all the others are going to be 0, corresponding to whichever is the active quarter. And then this is the quarterly version of the model, but you could fit it for any kind of time horizon. You could do a monthly seasonal trend model. If you have monthly data, then you would have 12 different of these dummy variables corresponding to whether the observation is within that month. And the dummies don't necessarily have to correspond to the frequency of your data either. It could be that you have daily data, but then you're still fitting a quarterly model if you think that the seasonality itself is actually quarterly. You want the frequency of the model to line up with the frequency of the seasonality rather than the frequency of the data. So that's a quick overview of forecasting these more complex time series. We'll come back in the following videos to look at estimating this quarterly seasonal trend model and then using the auto forecasting through profit with fin statement. So thanks for listening and see you next time.